Hi everyone, welcome back to Feather Stitch House. My name's Rebecca and each week on this channel I make videos about embroidery and textile art to help you get creative. We're in week 2 of our October Winging It piece, and last week we made our crumb quilt forest floor background to start us off. It was a bit of an unusual video because we went out and about first of all, and I took you on a little walk through the woods near my home. Thank you so much for all the love that video received. It's always a bit of a worry when you do something out of the ordinary on YouTube because you never know how well it's going to go down, but you seem to have loved that. And thanks also for all the love you gave my impromptu poetry lesson. Who knows what's going to happen today? You might get another one. Today we're going to add some fungi and mushrooms to our crumb quilt background. Hopefully I'll be able to show you how to simply draw some realistic looking mushroom shapes, and then we're going to applique the basis of our fungi onto our background. And we're not going to do too much over stitching today, although we will stitch them down to secure them to the background. But we are going to focus on creating templates and creating realistic shapes. So if you have it, tracing paper would be great as well. But if you don't have that, then baking parchment makes a really excellent substitute. You'll need a pencil, and I'm going to work in felt. If you don't have felt, then any other non-woven would be great. But if you don't have anything like that, then you can work around it either by just putting a little bit of glue around the edges of your fabric to stop it fraying, or, revolutionary idea, you could just embrace the fraying and make it part of your piece. So gather your bits and pieces and let's get stitching.
Another unusual start this week, and we're not going to sew for a little while because I thought I would help you sort of feel a bit more confident about drawing some mushroom shapes. As I said last week, there is a template available back from 2022's November, the first November panel where we looked at fungi, looking at earth tones. It's really simple, but it is very small, so you would have to enlarge it. So if you wanted that, I will put a link in the description below to that template. But I thought it would be good to show you that actually it's a lot more simple than you might think. So I've picked a handful of mushrooms that are common in the UK. You could just invent mushrooms if you want to. You could do some sort of imagined mushroom shapes based around these ideas if you want to, but I'm going to show you how to draw a couple of very common fungi from the UK. I think they appear in most temperate countries, so you might find them wherever you are as well. So we're going to start with the simplest, and I do have to turn my paper slightly just to get my angle. It's my wrist. Please bear with me. We're going to start with the simplest one, and we're going to look at the oak milk cap and look at the shape of that. So really simple. We're going to draw a straight line across. I'll try and do it dark enough so that you can see. Straight line across, and then we're basically, if we just mark about, what's that, about an inch up, we're going to sketch a line from one end of the line crossing through that point and coming down at the bottom like that. So it's kind of a flat semicircle, a little bit like that. You will find that if you're right-handed, that arc is easier, and if you're left-handed, that arc is easier. But there we go. So that's essentially it. But what we want to do is make it look three-dimensional. So we're just going to curve this bottom out a little bit, like that. Now on this mushroom you can't see the gills. I'm going to erase that line just to make it a little bit easier to see, and hopefully you can see that already looks like it would carry on and be round. And the stem of this mushroom is fairly central and it curves out from the base, so just like you would have drawn a tree trunk when you were a kid, like that. And the oat milk cap has little flecks on it that come up like that. I have to go a bit darker. I keep forgetting that I'm being filmed, even though I'm talking to myself. And with these, you want to make sure that they follow the curve. So out at the sides, they'd be more angled. They're all going to come as if they're coming down from the centre, like that. So when you get round to the front, you can make them a bit straighter, and then when we're coming out this way, we want them a little bit more angled in the other direction, something like that. So that is about as simple as you can get, and that is the oak milk cap. Now the next easiest one is probably the wax cap. Now these are a bit smaller, they're a lot smaller than the oak milk cap, so these I think grow to about this big. The wax cap grows to about this big, so we're going to do this a little bit smaller, but I want you to be able to see it. So fairly similar. This time we're going to start with the curve. Let's do it down here. So we're going to do the curve, but this time we're going to bring it to a little bit more of a point. I've probably gone a bit steep there. A little bit more of a point. So we're going to do our two curved lines. So if it helps, you can turn the page and get a similar curve. We're going to round off that top a little bit because we don't want it to be pointy, like that. So a sort of rounded upside down V shape, and we again want a round bottom, but we don't want it, these do grow very round, but these are a little bit more sort of, I don't know, frilly around the bottom, and so we've put our guideline in there, and what we're going to do is frilly it up a little bit. So we're just going to put some little waves in around the edge like that, and it has kind of little pleats, so we're just going to put some little lines coming up from that frill just to show it's kind of frilling. And if you want to, you can just turn out those corners to show that it's frilling like that. And this one has a bit of a curvy stem. They can grow in all sorts of weird and wonderful directions. So we're going to put a curved stem on that one. Now at different stages, so this is a wax cap, and they can be very bright colours, so you can get bright yellow ones, you can get bluish ones, bright green, very red orange, like that, and they grow in clusters, and at different stages they have different shapes. So when it's just emerging, it's more of a blob, so we're going to do a sort of semi-oval like that, and we're going to round it off and put a slightly wavy line at the bottom like that, and we can put a little stem in that joins on to the other one, so much more of a blob, so a sort of semi-oval with a flattened out wavy line at the bottom. like that. And then the third form it takes is when it's mature, these sort of frills lift up and open out and it becomes more plate-like. Now this is a little bit more tricky. So what we're going to do is start with a semi-oval, quite flat this time. And that wavy line that we did at the bottom here, we're going to do on the top, like that. So almost like a really shallow backwards S bend. You could do it the other direction if you wanted to. And then we're going to kind of mirror that on top. So I'm going to curve out the edge there and there. And I'm going to do another very shallow S on the top, like that. And because it's turned up on itself, we can see the stem. So I'm going to put a little curve, little half circle there, and I'm going to take my stem down from that, and then that little line disappears. We get rid of that. And on this one we can see the gills. So just like we've done our little lines here, we're going to put in our gills, and we want them to fan out from the stem. So these are fanning from the top of the mushroom, these are fanning from the stem, and so that is a wax cap, and you can choose whatever colour you like for that one. So let's do a blue round head now. Not unlike this one, but we're going to get a little bit more shape. So let's start by very lightly sketching a triangle, because that's basically where we're starting. So we want it to be kind of flat, it doesn't have to be symmetrical. And we're going to start by rounding the corners like that. And now we can join these up, but I don't want a straight line. I'm going to bow in ever so slightly and then bow up. So just a slight bow, and then we're going to do the same on the other side. Your bows don't have to be in the same place. So something like that, and then this little trick of the sort of arc at the bottom we're going to do on this one. So we're going to bow out, and that can come a little bit more bowed like that. So let's get rid of some of our starting point lines, and that'll give you a better sense of the shape. Probably bowed in a little bit too much. There we go. Like that. Now this one has a different shape of stem, so it starts narrower and it's going to end in a bit of a bulge. So we're going to do a bit of a curve like we did here, a bit shallower maybe, like that, and then we want the base of the mushroom to sort of point down. So we're going to do a little rounded shape there, and then it's going to taper up. So that's very sort of fairy mushroom shape, like that. And so this is the blue round head, obviously blue, and this one has spots on it, but they don't go all the way to the top. They're sort of located around the rim of the mushroom here, and they're clustered very close together at the rim. So you want some little flecks here, kind of obvious what stitches we would use. And then they get a little bit bigger. You don't want them to be too even, and you do want to make sure some of them come right from the side, because you want it to appear like these are going all the way around the mushroom. So you want one or two coming up a little bit higher, and you want some small ones in amongst the bigger ones. So that's the blue round head. Okay, so we're going to do something very similar but elongate it. And this one is called the shaggy ink cap. So again, we want to start with a triangle, but we want it steeper this time, a bit like a witch's hat, like that. It is October, something like that, and we're going to round the top like that, and we want our sides to come down quite steeply and sort of flare out a little bit at the bottom, like that. So this one is more pointy at the top, and once you're happy you can sort of sketch it in more definitely. Let's get rid of some of those sketch lines. So that's essentially the shape, and just like before, we want to put a rounded bottom so that it looks like it's three-dimensional, like that. And this one has a bit of a frill on the bottom, so we're just going to add an uneven line and just round that off a little bit. So we're just going to follow that curve that we did at the bottom in an uneven way and round that off. And this one has a very sort of straight stem that just slightly flares at the bottom, like that. And again, we're going to put a round base on that. And it also has a bit of a skirt, but not a very big one, so we're going to put another little curve there and add a double line, so that comes off the stem like that. So it has a little bit of a frill quite close to the base of the stem. Now this one is called the shaggy ink cap. It's called the ink cap because it lets out sort of black liquid, a little bit like ink. This one has kind of little lobes on the cap of the mushroom, and we're just going to show those with little wavy lines like that. And again, you want them to follow the curve, so some of them can be longer, some of them can be shorter, and you want them to get bigger as we get down to the bottom of the mushroom, like that. So that is a shaggy ink cap. So fly agaric, we're going to use a similar technique to this one here. Okay, so we're going to start with a dome, and these are quite large. So we're going to start with a dome, fairly flat and wide. So we've got our curved line that is like a shallow semicircle, like that. Okay, so what we're going to do now is create a bit of an S bend like this, a backwards S. So we're going to do a line, we want to round off the edge a little bit like that, and we're going to go up first and then down and then up again, like that. And that's the cap of our fly agaric, and this one has spots, but it's not like a toadstool like in a fairy story. They don't look like that at all. Instead we have long, thin, almost like scales, and again you want these to get more dense as they get down to this. So denser and smaller as they get down to the edge of the mushroom, like this. You can have some smaller ones, but mostly they're sort of little oval shapes. Okay, so now we're going to echo this curve underneath, like that. So we're just doing an arc on the bottom of the mushroom, like that. Nice smooth arc. And this one, we're going to put a stem. It's going to get quite wide at the bottom, like that. So there's our stem, and we're going to put a curve at the bottom. Try not to make it too even. So you can start with a U shape and then scoop a little bit out of it, like that. And this also has a little skirt on it, so about 1 inch down from where it meets the mushroom we're going to put a little curvy line, and then we're going to do 2 angled lines that come out from the side, like that, and then we're going to put a little frill, so an uneven curved line, like that. And then it also has a second frill near where it goes into the ground, so again we're going to put 2 lines across, a little angled line down from each, and we're going to put a little uneven line there, and then we're going to mess that second line up like that to put the skirt on. And this one has gills as well, so we're going to start from there and we're going to put our gills in, going out to the side. Bit like that, and we're going to make that a little bit darker there to show that's where the stem is attached to the mushroom. You can make that a little bit wider if you want to, you can narrow up the stem if you like, but that is a fly agaric. And our last one is tricky, it's a chanterelle, and so this one is like the the challenge mushroom, if you like. So we're going to start with an uneven oval, like that. Okay, so you don't just draw an oval, it could be slightly wider at one end than the other, that's fine. And then we're going to put one of these wavy S shapes at the top, so we're going to just go like that. Alright, because this is a trumpet chanterelle, and we're going to put some little lines that fan out from that, like that. So they're going to curve in on the top and they're going to bow out on the bottom, and that's going to give us the impression that there's a little dent in the top of that. Now we're going to use these to just adjust the edge, so where that would meet the edge we're going to put a little curve, so we're going to we're going to make this edge a little bit more uneven. And make it look a little bit like an umbrella. We don't want it pointy though, we don't want little pointy bits, so just shallow curves like that, just to make it a little bit less even. Okay, we're good. Right, now this stem is unusual. So it starts very wide, so we're going to put a little line here and a little line here, and it goes very narrow very quickly, so it's like a trumpet shape on the bottom as well as on the top, so something a bit like that. And this has lots of gills on it, so the stem has gills as well. That's one chanterelle, and we're going to, they grow in clumps and clusters, so we're going to join it to another one. So we're going to take this down into a U shape, come up and fan out again like that, and then we're going to mirror that line, bring it round in a little curve and fan it out on the other side, and that's our new stem. So let's put some gills on it, and we're going to create a shape a little bit like this, or a bit like this one here on the top. So let's start with our line across the bottom. We want to come out a little bit wider, and we're going to put a little curvy line. So start up, dip down a little way, go back up, dip down again and go back up. Then we're going to round that off, and then we're going to do something similar on the other end like that. There we go. And if you want to, you can put your curved line on the top again and put in your little lobes, but you don't have to, because this is a less developed mushroom. So that is a chanterelle. So 6 different mushrooms that you can have a go at sketching, and these are fairly common shapes. So once you've got your head around how to create different shapes, you can really play around with these. So this is how I've created my templates, and what I did was I drew some in the sizes that I wanted and inked them in, and then traced them onto a frame. So I've done a couple of versions of this. So I drew my frame and then I overlaid them. Now I couldn't get in my oak milk cap, so what I did was use the principle here to create my sulphur caps that are grown in my garden. So they grow in little clusters, very similar to this shape. It's sort of halfway between this one and this one, a little bit narrower, just pointy triangles with thin stems growing in a cluster, and I've created a little arrangement now. I will leave that on the screen for a moment. If you want to screenshot it, you can, and you can use it as a template, but that is what I'm going to work from to create my fungi display on my frame. So I'm going to work in felt. I'm going to get some felt out of my stash in the colours that I want to use, and then I'll show you how to create templates out of these. I hope that's been helpful. Okay, I've chosen some felt. So I've got some blue for this one here. I've got some red and white for this one. I'm going to do my chanterelle in this mustardy yellow. My wax caps I've got a green for, and this one I thought I would do in a grey and the white as well. We can stitch over the top. Oh, my sulphur caps, I forgot about those. Hang on. Right, I'm back. I knew exactly the felt I wanted. So it's this sort of gold colour, and I may use this as well for the gills on my chanterelles. I keep calling these sulphur caps. They're sulphur tuft mushrooms. Apologies, I'm so used to talking about caps. I've forgotten what this one's called. What's it called? Blue roundhead. Everything's called a something cap, and it's my age, I keep saying. Right, I'm going to show you a couple of ways of transferring these. So let's start with a fairly simple shape, and let's do this blue round head. I apologise for the crackling. I've got some baking parchment here. If you don't have tracing paper, this is the perfect substitute, and most of us have it in our houses. You don't see tracing paper around very much anymore. So what I'm going to do is trace these as two separate sections. So I'm doing the cap and then I'm going to do the stem, and I'm labelling them. Just imagining the missing bit. And I've gone a bit high up, but I don't really want to, so I'm going to make these match up exactly. Now if I was doing fabric I would do a little overlap, but because I'm doing felt it will hold its shape pretty well. So that's the blue round head. I'm going to get some paper scissors. I want to use my embroidery scissors like I did that time and had to buy a new pair because once was enough. Couldn't get them sharp at the tip even with my scissor sharpener. So I'm just going to cut this out. So this is one way of transferring shapes onto felt. There are many ways, so I thought I'd show you a few. So let's get our blue felt. So first way is super simple. So we're just going to take our shape and we're going to pin it on. You can pin it in a couple of places if you want to. Points are good places to pin it. I've just done it in the middle there. Maybe you can be generous with the pins. That'll do. And then we can put our stem on as well. Trying to be frugal with the felt, so I don't want loads of space between them. You could draw around these, but parchment and tracing paper is not especially robust, so you are going to get changes in shape. It's going to be hard to keep them steady, and I'm just going to cut around my tracing paper. So when you get to if you've got any pin heads that are overhanging, you just lift them up, bend the felt away, and you'll create some space. And it doesn't have to be absolutely precise. You don't want to be way off, but that's pretty good there. And then I'm just going to, this is probably the only time where you need to be particular. So that stem's a little bit wide. I'm only using paper scissors. I could, with wool felt, you can use your embroidery scissors, but because I'm so close to the paper, I don't want a mishap. So that's that shape. So I'm just pinching, because it's loose there, I'm just pinching the paper close to the felt as I cut past it. That's going to help me get a precise shape. There we go. So that's my blue round head pieces, and they should marry up quite well. If there's a little gap, it's really not the end of the world with felt, but they do marry up quite well. So that's my blue round head. Let's get that out of the way. So another way of using tracing paper is to transfer that pattern then onto some Bonder web. So let's do the ink cap. So I'm just going to trace that shape like that, and I want to do a blend in this, so we're going to do a bit of the cap in grey and a bit in white. So I don't want the grey too far up, so I'm just going to put a line around there. We're going to blend it with thread, and then I want the stem of the ink cap. I'm not worrying about the frill at the minute because we're going to do that in a different way. Okay, now if you've used a pencil, this is going to work really nicely. I'm missing something, hang on a second. So I've got some Bonder web here. It's not Bonder web actually, this is a new product that I'm trying out. It's iron-on glue. It's intended for stickers and it's a lot shinier. I don't know if you can tell by the shine on the back, but with heat and seal or Bond web, the glue is like a mesh, so there are spaces between it, but with this one it's a solid glue surface, and when it arrived I was worried that this would be really hard to stitch through because it's just a solid layer of glue, but I've actually found it a lot softer than Bonder web or heat and seal. Just trying to show you the surface there. It actually works really nicely, and I quite like it. It does feel very different, but you get used to it. The downside is it's quite slippy. This is almost like, I don't know, it's like a glossy paper on the back that makes it difficult to hold your shape in place. So that's the only downside, you have to hold it quite tight. Right, just like Wednesday, I've already filmed this once and wasn't recording, so that's why there's already lines. So what I'm going to do is transfer this shape now onto my Bonder web. When you're using Bonder web, I'm going to use Bonder web as a generic term of fusible glue. You have to reverse everything, because if we were to draw around our shape straight, because you can trace with this stuff, look, it's quite see-through, you could trace directly, but if we do that, we then peel off the paper backing, we iron it onto our felt, drawing side up, peel off the paper backing, but then we have to flip it over to attach it to our felt, and that means that everything's reversed. Now for this one, it's fairly symmetrical, it's not going to make that much difference, but for our sulphur tufts or our fly agaric, that would completely change the look. And so what we're going to do is reverse it, and we do that by flipping our tracing paper over, and I'm going to do 3 shapes because I want to do this on different felt. All I'm going to do is, you need to use a relatively soft pencil, so an HB, I think in America you call it a number 2 pencil, or softer. So that's my first shape, and if I take that away, you can see it worked better last time because there was more graphite still on the other side of the paper, but I have kind of scored a line. If you press on a little bit, you transfer the line. So I've got that first shape, then I want to do this skirt. I'm just kind of sketching over it, hoping that I'll get as much of the remaining graphite as I can. So there we go, let's put that in. So shiny means it doesn't take pen or pencil particularly well either, but it does enough. And then we're going to do the cap, and that means that they are going to be the correct orientation once I've stuck them onto my bond web. Oh, I've overlapped there. It's alright, I've already done it. So I can then cut these out, and what I would recommend is that you cut out with a little bit of a border. You don't want to waste loads of felt by cutting out the whole shape, but you don't want to cut on the line either. I'll explain why in a second. Now, because we're using parchment, here are my shapes that I've already put on. Because we're using parchment, we can then also use it as a press cloth. So what I'm going to do is lay out my shapes on the white, put my parchment over the top. Make sure your fusible webbing is glue side down, so your drawing needs to be right side up. And then I'm just going to put my iron over the top, hold it in place for a few seconds. Always follow the instructions on your product. Bonder web you have to hold much longer. Heat and seal is quite quick. This one's quite quick as well. And then using paper scissors, because we are cutting through a layer of paper, I then can cut around directly onto the line, and that means that I'm going to get a really precise shape, and the glue that I'm using is going to go right to the very edge of the shape. If you cut your shape out exactly, you've either got to cut into it to get glue to the edge, or be cautious and end up with sections of the edge that you haven't quite got glue on. So that's my first shape. That's my second shape. And so these are going to fit together like so, and then my mushroom stalk is going to go on the bottom. Oh, that's so cute. Third method, and this was suggested by somebody in a comment. I'm so sorry, I can't remember your name, but I promised I would use this method. So this is a product called waxed paper or freezer paper. It's not easy to come by in the UK, and so you need to hunt around for it. I got this online. It's basically just normal paper on one side, and it has a layer of wax on the other side, and this works very much like the this method, but it's more secure. Let's do a fly agaric in this one. So again, you can just about see through it. I can probably see through it a bit better than you can. You don't need to transfer the shape, so you don't need to turn it around. So I'm just going to trace through. If you can't see it, you could use the light box or hold it up to the window. As long as I've got light on the page, I'm fine. So that's my fly top. Just going to move it down a little way and get my fly gills. So I just want the shape of that mushroom. Now this one I cut out precisely. I really hope this works. If it doesn't though, you'll see why I don't use this method more often. Now if you are going to get some freezer paper, make sure it is freezer paper and not just waxed paper. Waxed paper tends to be waxed on both sides. How does she know this, you ask yourself? All that you will achieve is a terrible mess and an iron cleaning job. Yes, I've done it. Okay, right, let me move my book out of the way. So, fly top, I've lost a piece, I'll get it back in a minute. Fly top, we're going to put on the red, and so we want to put it wax side down, so my pencil marks are facing up. And just like with Bondaweb, we're just going to press it. I'm just going to put my iron on top and hold it in place. And what this does is it melts the wax and sticks it to the felt. I'll find them in a second, but you get the idea. So now I can come in, I'm going to be brave and use my embroidery scissors. I don't want to cut that paper, but hopefully you can see that I can, I mean you could do it the same way. I'm too scared, I'm going to get my other scissors back. You could do it the same way as with Bondaweb and cut out on the line more precisely once it's attached, but you can see that that freezer paper is attached to the felt. And the beauty of this is that our shape is the right way round. There are no pencil marks on our felt, and what we can do is just, when we're ready, peel off the waxed paper, and it leaves no residue at all on the felt, so we've got an exact shape with no hassle at all. So you can, obviously I'm going to leave it on the others, and you should be able to reattach it by remelting the wax. Let's try. Might not be as secure the second time, but yeah, that has reattached. So that's the freezer paper method. So you can use any of these methods to transfer your shapes onto your felt. Hopefully that's given you some ideas. I'm going to do the rest and then we'll come back and attach them to our background. Okay, so what you might be wondering is how we get our design onto our woodland floor background, and so what I've done is put my baking parchment over the top, and I've just marked in a couple of anchor points. So you want the sort of extreme edges of the mushrooms, any crossing points where mushrooms pass over each other, and where the bases are, where the tops are. So that should be enough as a bit of a guide. You can draw around the whole thing if you want to, but you don't need to. I've also marked the edges of my frame, and so that's all I'm working with. And so now I can take my book away, and I'm going to bring back in my woodland floor, and I don't know whether you'll be able to see, but I have marked in my border in a red heat erase pen, so that means I can hopefully line up my edges. I'm going to use some pins. You could use those little applique pins. Mine are just out of reach, so I'm just going to do it like this, and I'm pinning right through into my wall mat. Like that. So first of all, I'm going to position my ink cap. Just going to poke it through like that. So if we just align a couple of pieces, we should be fine. So this was my blue round head. You can see that it's fitting really nicely. So let's put that in a couple of places because it will spin otherwise. I have to do the same for my ink cap. And I can put in my fly agaric top. I've used different methods, so there needs to be different ways up. Just have to remember which way is which. So you can see it's matching up really nicely with my marker points. Done it again. So I'll cut that all out in one piece. I haven't bothered with the stems apart from this bit to join the two sections up, because there's one that's separate from the others. I just popped that one in. So what I'm going to do now is tear away that paper. So I'm going to tear it off from around the pins. You can cut into it if it makes it easier. So if you cut up to a couple of the pins, it should make it a bit easier. You can lift up your felt to help you on your way. So now we have the positions of our mushrooms, and we can put all the other pieces in. I mean, you could just arrange them however you like, but we've been so careful to get our shapes correct that it seems a shame to just not use our design. There we go, that's our mushroom display. So this one is really easy. I'm going to peel off the paper. So this was our fusible glue. I'm just going to carefully peel that paper off. Because we used chiffon ribbon, if I get it too hot it's going to melt, so I'm just going to put a little bit of parchment over the top because I don't want the iron to touch it. Now this won't stick exactly because felt has got quite a lot of layers, but it will stick enough. You just want enough to melt that glue down. When I'm done I will flip it over and probably press it from behind as well. So that's the only one of those that I did. The rest I'm going to just stitch down with an applique stitch, and I've just got a white thread here. Another reason why I like using felt is that it's so forgiving, so you can match your thread if you want to, but if you keep your stitches small you will find that the thread kind of eats the stitch, and it will get buried inside the pile of the felt. So with these now I need to just tip my pins so that they're holding the shapes in place. So I can take some of these out. Now I've positioned them, and I can tweak it as I'm stitching. I've got my thread, just normal normal machine thread, and I'll start on the blue just because it'll show up. I'm just going to use a really simple applique stitch, so I come up through the backing and the felt, and then I'm just going to go back down over the edge like that, and it is visible but we're going to embroider over the top, and so it will be fine. So I'm just going to, you can do it either way, you can come up on the felt and go down at the edge, or you can come up at the edge and go down on the felt. Either works perfectly fine, but I'm just going to put in some little applique stitches to hold these shapes in place. Once you've got your eye in, you can do it in one motion. I'm not going to make you sit and watch all of these. And as I say, if you want to, you could just put some little dabs of fabric glue on the back, and as long as your edges are down, that will hold them in place ready for our stitching next week. So I'm going to put those on and then I'll come back and show you how it's looking. So there we go. If you were wondering, by the way, why I've done the caps separately, it's so that I've got a sense of the shape of them compared to the stems. So on most of them, not these because they were too small, but on most of these I don't now need to sketch in loads of additional lines because my piecing tells me where the caps end and the stems begin. So that's where we're going to leave it for this week. Hope you've enjoyed that little art lesson, I suppose, bit of advice on how to create mushroom shapes. There's plenty there to play around with, and I hope that you get really creative and imaginative with yours, just so that you've got a sense of how it's looking so far. If I put my aperture back on and take away the rough edges, you get much more of a sense of how that's going to look, and I'm loving these earthy colours on our forest floor background, and I'm really pleased that we can still see plenty of it even though we've put the mushrooms on. So next week we're going to embroider over the top and really bring our mushrooms to life, give them some dimension and structure, and put the stems in on these. So I hope you'll join me for that. If you've enjoyed this little applique journey and want to do a little bit more work that's similar to this, I'll put a video up here, and I'll put the whole Winging It 2024 playlist down here so that you can go back and watch any of the videos that you might have missed in this series. Thank you so much for watching. Have a great week making your mushrooms, and I will see you in the next video. Take care. Bye.